ELI5. Why does old software get buggy when it hasn't been updated for a while? Shouldn't have the same amount of bugs as it was when that version was released. Software running on a totally closed system will not generate new software bugs. Examples might include old-school arcade games, appliances like a microwave oven, and old digital watches. These systems might show new errors as the hardware gets old and fails in ways the software was never written to handle. But any software that has to talk to other software will show new bugs over time because the writers of the code could not predict every possible new change. The software needs to be able to keep up with all the other software that it interacts with. If you have a moped on a road, it works well. What happens when that road becomes a 4-lane highway and suddenly the other mopeds are now cars? Kinda like that. Software when new. Windows. Can I have X, Y, and Z? Windows. Absolutely. Software 10 years after last update. Windows. Can I have X, Y, and Z? Asterisk Windows. After having just received a new updates. I can give you X. But Y has been replaced with Y1, and Z has been deprecated since June due to safety concerns. Software never written to handle this error. Quote, "It's not that the software itself gets more buggy. It's that compatibility with the libraries and the operating system is lost. So things little incompatibilities might result in small bugs. One of my favorite examples is that some games used the PC clock speed for the game speed. So modern faster queues result in a game that is unplayable because it's so fast." Have you ever read Shakespeare? It's written in English. But English has changed over the years, so what he wrote doesn't quite make sense anymore. Same idea with software. Windows 98 and Windows 10 are both Windows, but they do things differently. So what used to work talking in Windows 95 doesn't necessarily work taking in Windows 10. Or even things written in Windows 10 old patch versus Windows 10 new patch, depending on what the patch changed. Yet another reason is security patches. Software often needs to be updated because there are lots of people actively trying to find ways to break it on purpose. So it might have had a security bug all along, but no one knew about it, or had even conceived of the method of attack at the time the software was written. So it has to be changed to address that. You have it upside down. The software does get buggy. It is buggy. But nobody knew about it. That is, sometimes the bad guys may actually know but not tell anyone about it. As time goes by, the software's underlying components get tested more, and the software gets used in new ways, opening bugs and issues to be resolved. Software that isn't maintained isn't safe, secure. Just the opposite. While the software hasn't changed to cause any new bugs, the environment that is executing the software has. I once worked with a guy who described it as rot. Software decays over time, not necessarily all on its own, although maybe that too, but because the environment changes around it. Hardware, operating systems, drivers, other software, browsers, e.g., networks and protocols, the hardware and OS and software on the other side of the network, etc. Those change all the time. And there's no certainty your software will continue to be compatible. If you don't update a program, but the rest of your system is connected to the internet and auto-updating, i.e. Windows 10, Java, browser, .NET framework, etc. Then it can get bugs from these dependencies changing their code. The dependencies changing their code breaks assumptions that your program uses, causing a bug. It's kind of like how kids and parents all start with the same style of communication. But if the old parent software doesn't update, then eventually their kids will start saying shit like cronk or whatever, and eating detergent packets, and suddenly the parent software freaks out cause it is having problems understanding some things. Because Apple changes their damn operating system constantly and breaks old software in the process. Source: am Mac, iOS developer. It's a choice. Really. Apple is constantly changing things to push the platform forward, while companies like Microsoft valued backward compatibility more, at least until fairly recently. Often what happens is the OS and libraries are updated to newer versions. The software is unchanged, but it is no longer compatible with the newer libraries and system calls. I had one game that you had to use a very old version of PhysX. If any newer versions were installed, it would not run. You would have to remove every version but the one the game needed. A related question is why old hardware seemed fast when we bought it but becomes sluggish the older it gets. This happens to closed systems such as car navigation systems as well. Compatibility issue with new stuff. Software doesn't become buggy. The OS or embedded system it runs on changes. As an OS matures, the API and what that API does changes. Some API changes are software breaking. Some just end up with unexpected results. Don't forget maintenance and updates to the code. The older the code, the more fixes and updates have been implemented. Some might have unintended consequences. It was designed to work well with the things it had to communicate with at the time. Those things were also at the same code LVL, i.e. someone speaking Latin would work well with speaking to other Latin speakers or even Greek. But now that the language has been updated, it doesn't work too well and runs into issues. When Windows runs a program, they take to each other in English, but when Windows gets an update, it may start talking in half English, half German. Your old program will need to learn the same half English, half German, be able to understand what Windows is now saying. Yes, the software will have the same amount of bugs in it, but other issues will arise as it interacts with new programs. Let's say you program a robot to kick a blue ball. It will kick that ball just fine after a month, year, 2 years, etc. What happens when that ball pops though and the new ball is a different shade of blue? Will the machine still recognize it? How different can the shade of blue be before it no longer recognizes it 100% of the time? New vulnerabilities are discovered every day. Think of those as ports on a submarine. When one port vulnerability is opened, new code needs to be applied to close the port and keep the submarine, your old software, safe. I like to think that Shakespeare spoke an excellent English for the time he was alive. However, if he were to be reborn now, he wouldn't be able to effectively communicate with a modern-day English person. Even perfectly bug-free software could have bugs introduced without changing the code because the environment it deals with has changed. Most likely it is your perception of where the bug lies that is causing you confusion. What you perceive as a bug is a problem somewhere and may have nothing to do with code. Even code that is faulty can sometimes be debatable as to where the responsibility of the bug lies. But the actual answer to your question is, code does not change once compiled, so any bugs found in a version of code were always present. Over time, as new features are added to newer versions of software, older versions become increasingly incompatible with them. This can cause old software to become buggy and unstable. Additionally, new security risks may be discovered in older versions of software that have not been addressed in recent updates. For these reasons, it is generally advisable to keep your software up to date. There's also the concept of drivers, which is basically interface code so that one system can talk to another. If system A updates, and system B updates, you'll likely end up with new drivers. If you update A, and not B, you might be in an unsupported state. Most software has a part of it called recovery routine. It's there to react to hardware failures. As the hardware gets older, there are more frequent and types of failures that the software can't handle. Not really an ELI5 answer, but coincidentally I got this gem in email today. https://2022-04-17-code-rot/he actually walks through the problem in detail, so it's worth a read even if it's a little too detailed for non-developers. If shared libraries, sections of code that multiple programs rely on, update in a way that is not 100% backwards compatible, old software can get bad information back because the developers of the shared library might not be aware how some of the users are using said software. Because you updated the operating system back in Windows XP, I never updated the software and the OS, and it still works fine today. I still remember my stepmother being in a government office on Y2K. Something about Fortran or something like that. She wrote the code or something 20 years prior. In softwares typically will have dependencies with other services. If those services getting an update and the update won't meet the old software specs, then the new bugs will show up. It's because the underlying files that the software relies on get changed via system updates or similar. Eventually, they change beyond what the old software knows about, and so it can't work. Software doesn't get more bugs. The bugs were always there. As the software encounters new circumstances, the bugs get exposed. I'm running Windows 10 Pro build 14393 and have 0 issues. I blocked all Windows servers in the hosts file and disabled every Windows Update feature I could find. Windows works flawlessly. On a whim I updated and it works like garbage. The hours I spent into resetting it the way I liked it were frustrating. I would very much disagree with OP's assessment. You just haven't had time to find them all. Also, the operating system changes and they breaks your software. It depends. If it's old code on an old machine, then new errors only happen if the hardware is damaged. If it's old software on new hardware, then new bugs can happen because maybe the code wants to do things that new processes can't. Or other code the software needs isn't installed on new devices. Don't forget to share, like and subscribe for more content.